Okay, can you all hear me all right?
We can hear and see.
All right, great. Thanks for having me as part of the stakeholder meeting today. So I'll run through some updates on the project here. So again, another discussion of Seriola. Just a little background in terms of why we're even talking about Seriola globally, right? Major species in terms of aquaculture production. A lot of times, it's not necessarily the Rivoliana, but that's changing. A lot of common names out there, right? So when you go to things like the Seafood Expo and stuff, be aware that there's a lot of different names that are being referred to in terms of this genus Seriola. So candidate species, right? Is great work put out. This all started back in 2021, I believe it was. But this list came out after much discussion amongst stakeholders all over the nation in terms of those top candidate species, and it's no coincidence that two of those are Seriola species. You just heard about the dorsalis, right, or the formerly the Landi, dorsolandi, whatever you want to call it, and the Rivoliana, which you see here, right, and so number of species, a number of publications have identified that indeed these are strong candidate species. A lot of advancements have been made over recent years, not only in the U.S. but globally. You just heard about closed cycle production, improved nutrition, grow out technologies, both land-based and ocean-based. So when we talk about candidate species for the U.S., the Seriola species definitely rise to the top in terms of being some top contenders for candidate species because of that ability to be produced in both land-based and ocean-based systems. So as marketing, improved consumer awareness. You go back 10, 20 years ago, probably not a lot of people in the U.S. were familiar with Seriola products, and that is changing. You see more consumer demand for that, but there's still challenges, right? And so globally, a lot of the operations are still reliant on wild-caught juveniles for use as seed stock. Disease issues, occur in some countries. Production efficiencies, there's still a lot of room for improvement there when we talk about production efficiencies. And when I say efficiencies, that can be measured in a number of different ways, right? You can measure efficiency in terms of FCRs or production costs, right? Or any sort of metric you want to use that can measure efficiency, and we'll talk more about that during the presentation. Feed costs, again, there's always room for that to come down. But also keeping in mind consumer market challenges, right? What will the market bear? There's a lot of sort of estimates, right? Japan targeting over 240,000 million tons coming out of the country in terms of export, and so metric tons, excuse me. And so that's something that what is that going to do for the global market in terms of a lot of these other operations that are getting started or only exist on paper. And then the U.S., we do still see some regulatory and social license issues. There have been some great gains in that respect. Some of the people on this call have done a tremendous amount of work addressing this. And thanks to them, we see a lot of progress in that area, and we're optimistic for the future. In terms of U.S. specifically, net pen operations, blue ocean mariculture is the top one that comes to mind. There are other ones that are planned. Land-based, some various stages of development, and some of the people on the call are very familiar with these. Finfish, Maine, sort of leading the way there, but others existing on paper in varying states of development. So specifically, that's sort of the background. Specifically at the University of Miami, we're focused on broodstock research as well as bioenergetics research. Objectives within the bioenergetics research, really getting into the physiology of these organisms, looking at optimizing aquaculture performance, and we think this is a critical area of research for improved aquaculture sustainability and profitability. If you haven't been to the University of Miami aquaculture facility here in Virginia Key, Florida, I encourage you to come visit. We do a lot of different research and development focused on marine species, not just finfish species, but a lot of different top candidate species for the U.S. industry. In terms of bioenergetics research, we're looking at optimizing aquaculture performance. Again, we see a need to understand these energetic demands to improve production efficiencies. Optimal rearing conditions are really species specific. So a lot of times when you go to an aquaculture conference or other trade shows, that sort of thing, people talk about, oh, we got a turnkey system here, that sort of thing. doesn't necessarily apply for all different marine species. So there's really not a lot of information out there for the Rivoliana. There's limited info when we talk about optimal rearing conditions on Dorsalis, but there's been some recent info out there from collaborators at the previous institution you just heard about, making a lot of gains there in terms of providing that information, which is great. And in terms of the bioenergetics research, this allows for improved economic and ecological efficiencies, which at the end of the day, these are the keys to sustainability and most importantly, profitability, right? Because if something is not economically viable, it's not going to be adopted by the industry. Okay, so we can do all the science you want, but at the end of the day, these efforts have to really help the farming community in terms of improving operations and improving profitability so that farms can survive and thrive, not only here in the US, but globally. And so as part of the bioenergetics research, we're testing metabolic performance under various commercially relevant conditions, and this allows us to optimize that performance. You can liken it to when you go get a stress test, right? And they put you on a treadmill, that sort of thing. They're looking at your overall performance. We're doing the same sort of thing in fish in terms of essentially putting them on fish treadmills, right? So we've done some comparative bioenergetics research here. That work is still in progress. And then we're doing some work looking at temperature impacts on aquaculture performance, seeing what temperature conditions, allow for aquaculture performance to be optimized. Okay, so if we look at this graph here, you've got your maximum metabolic rate, your standard metabolic rate. The difference between these two is known as the aerobic scope, and the point at which that scope is maximized is where we typically see the maximum scope for growth. And so from a farming perspective, this is highly relevant for improving culture of these species and improving the efficiencies, right? And so we do see these differences in water temperatures and overall bioenergetics between various species of Seriola. You see the Dorsalis and Rivoliana juveniles there, and so we definitely are seeing those differences. Doing this sort of bioenergetics research, we're also able to identify optimal swim speeds, and there's an ample amount of literature showing that when fish are grown at optimal swim speeds, they grow faster, right? And so that's something that we can determine objectively using swim tunnel respirometry. This also allows producers to optimize strategies for fish transfer from land-based nursery to grow-out systems, because a lot of time any successful net pen operation is going to be reliant upon a land-based, typically RSMAS nursery operation. Okay, and so there's always that decision that producers have to make in terms of when do we put the fish out to sea, and this type of bioenergetics research can really help inform that in terms of looking at different water current speeds and the impacts that may have on the overall metabolic performance in marine fish species. So again, we've been doing this comparative analysis in these two species. And this is particularly relevant these days in terms of NOAA's recent identification of these aquaculture opportunity areas. A lot of this temperature-based research can help inform selection of suitable grow-out sites for Seriola species. And so we're going to be doing continued work on this. We're going to improve production efficiencies based upon new insights from bioenergetics research. We're going to continue to maintain broodstock of Almaco Jack at the university here, and continue with the ongoing collaboration with all of you on the call here in terms of USDA, FAU, to address these opportunities and challenges with Seriola species. This work would not be possible without this great collaboration. It's been ongoing. A number of you here on the call, which is great to see, as well as the hard work and dedication of Aquaculture staff, students, and volunteers. And with that, typically I would be happy to take any questions, but it sounds like we're going to leave that to the end of the meeting, which again, happy to take questions at that point in time.